For the better part of 6 years, he was widely considered the best pound-for-pound fighter on the entire planet. He defended his world title more times in a row than anyone in the history of the UFC, and he made elite fighters look like they had wandered into the wrong sport. And yet, somehow, he was never treated like a superstar. He did not get the giant paydays. He did not headline the biggest events. By some accounts, he was one of the most underpaid great champions the sport has ever produced. This is the story of Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson, the most dominant champion the UFC ever crowned, and the man who had to leave it to finally be valued. It starts in Parkland, Washington. Demetrious Johnson was born on the 13th of August, 1986 in Kentucky, but he grew up in Parkland, Washington, in circumstances most people would struggle to imagine. He was raised largely by a single mother who was deaf, and through her sheer force of will, her kids did not even fully realize she could not hear until they were older. There was real hardship in that home, including an abusive stepfather. But Johnson came through all of it without bitterness, quietly determined, and he found his way into martial arts, where a small, unassuming kid discovered he could do things almost nobody else could. And that is exactly what he became. At just 5 feet 3 inches, Johnson was tiny, even by the standards of the lightest weight classes, but he was impossibly fast, and his technical skill was on another level entirely. He blended wrestling, striking, and submissions so smoothly that opponents simply could not keep up. He worked his way up through the smaller promotions and into the UFC, and in 2012 he made history as the very first UFC flyweight champion. Then he did something no fighter in the company had ever managed. He defended that belt 11 times in a row, breaking the all-time record for consecutive title defenses. For years, when people argued about the best fighter alive regardless of weight, his name was almost always the answer. But here is the strange, frustrating part of his story. For all that dominance, the rewards never matched the greatness. His division, the flyweights, did not sell pay-per-views the way the heavier, flashier weight classes did. And Johnson was never a loud man. He did not trash talk. He did not chase drama. He just showed up and dismantled people. So the promotion never marketed him like the superstar he was, and his paychecks showed it. In one of his early title fights, he was reportedly guaranteed just $14,000. Even at his peak, the best fighter in the world was earning a fraction of what louder, less accomplished fighters were pulling in. There was real friction behind the scenes too, including a bitter public dispute over being pressured into a fight he did not want. The most skilled man in the sport had somehow become one of the most overlooked. If you are enjoying this story of one of the most underrated fighters who ever lived, take a second to subscribe. We break down the real lives, the money and the legacies behind the biggest names in fighting every single week. Then, in 2018, something happened that had never happened before in the sport. Demetrious Johnson was traded, not released, not signed away, but traded, the way athletes are swapped between teams in other sports, from the UFC to a rival organization called One Championship, in exchange for a fighter named Ben Askren. It was the first deal of its kind in mixed martial arts history. And in his new home, everything changed. He was finally paid and treated like the legend he was, with a far bigger salary and genuine respect. He even praised the healthier approach to weight cutting there, a system that treated fighters better. He went on to win a Grand Prix tournament and capture a world title in that promotion too. The man the UFC had quietly underused became a centerpiece somewhere else. So let us talk about the money, because it tells the whole story. Demetrious Johnson's net worth is estimated at around $6 million. That is a comfortable fortune, but for a man so often called one of the greatest fighters who has ever lived, it is a tiny fraction of what the sport's loudest stars have banked. And the way he lives explains exactly why he was always different. He never chased the flashy life. He is a devoted family man who credits his wife for changing his life and pours his energy into securing a future for his 3 children. He even runs a foundation back in Washington to help homeless people in his community. And here is the detail that sums him up perfectly. For all his brilliance on the ground, all those submission wins, he never bothered chasing a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He cared about being genuinely skilled, not about the color of a belt or the size of the spotlight. And this is how you have to understand the idea of an empire when it comes to Mighty Mouse. He did not build a fortune or a flashy brand. What he built was mastery. The most technically perfect run the sport had ever seen, achieved without the ego, without the noise, and without the rewards that lesser fighters were handed. His empire was respect, earned the hard way, one flawless performance at a time. And when his fighting days wound down, he did the thing that defines him one more time. He reinvented himself quietly, on his own terms. Instead of clinging to the cage, Johnson built a whole second career as one of the most successful gamers and online creators to ever come out of the sport, gathering a huge and loyal following by streaming and making content. The overlooked kid from Parkland, so underrated in his prime, became a self-made media presence, valued at last, entirely by his own hand. So step back and look at the whole picture. Demetrious Johnson may be the most dominant champion the UFC ever produced, and also the least celebrated. He proved something the sport does not always want to admit, that being the very best does not automatically make you the richest, or the most famous, or the loudest. It just makes you the best. Whether history finally gives Mighty Mouse the credit he has always deserved is maybe the one fight he cannot win on skill alone. So here is the question worth sitting with. Years from now, when people rank the greatest fighters who ever lived, will Demetrious Johnson finally get his due as one of the very best, or will he always be the quiet genius the sport never quite appreciated in his prime? Drop your take in the comments. We genuinely want to hear it. And if you want more real stories from the world of fighting, the legends, the snubs, and the legacies behind the biggest names, hit subscribe and stick around. We have a new one for you every single week.